The silent scream, the Nexus station hung in the void between three star systems like a massive flower made of metal and light. Its crystalline spires stretched 4 kilometers in all directions, each one designed to accommodate different atmospheric requirements and gravitational preferences. For over 2,000 years, this neutral ground had hosted diplomatic meetings between hundreds of species across the galaxy. Today, it buzzed with an energy that felt different, desperate. Ambassador Kethari glided through the main corridor on legs that seemed too delicate to support her towering frame. The Zenthari were known throughout the galaxy for their grace and their ability to sense emotions through telepathic touch. Right now, every surface her fingertips brushed radiated the same feeling, fear. Pure, overwhelming fear from species that had never known such an emotion. She paused at the entrance to Conference Hall Alpha, watching through the transparent aluminum walls as representatives from dozens of worlds argued in hushed tones. The Velothians floated in their environmental bubbles, their gaseous forms shifting between colors that indicated extreme distress. The Korthax delegation stood in their powered armor, but even their mechanical voices carried traces of concern. Most disturbing of all, the Eternal Assembly had sent representatives. The Eternals never attended galactic meetings because they considered themselves above such concerns. Their presence meant something was terribly wrong. Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood at the observation deck, her human eyes taking in details that her more advanced companions might miss. She had been studying xenobiology for 15 years, ever since humanity made first contact with the Zenthari. As the only human xenobiologist stationed at Nexus, she often felt like an outsider among civilizations that had been exploring space for millennia. Today, that outsider perspective might be exactly what was needed. The pattern is becoming clearer, she said to her companion, Captain Marcus Chen. The military advisor was officially there to observe, but Sarah knew the real reason for his presence. Humanity was still considered a minor species, barely worthy of notice, but they were slowly earning their place in galactic society through careful diplomacy and useful scientific contributions. Marcus studied the holographic display Sarah had prepared. Red dots marked star systems across the galaxy, each one representing a civilization that had simply stopped communicating. 17 systems in the past month, he said quietly. All of them advanced civilizations with populations in the billions. Not just advanced, Sarah corrected. Look at the pattern. Every single system that went silent was known for peaceful development, artistic achievement, or scientific research. The warrior species, the industrial civilizations, the traders, focused on expansion, they're all still here. Through the conference hall speakers, they could hear Ambassador Kethari addressing the assembly. Her voice carried the musical quality typical of Zenthari speech, but underneath it was something Sarah had never heard before: uncertainty. Honored delegates, we have confirmed the loss of contact with the Seraphim homeworlds. The entire system appears to be ... empty. Our long-range sensors detect no life signs, no artificial energy signatures, no debris fields that would indicate conflict or natural disaster. It is as if 7 billion beings simply ceased to exist. The reaction was immediate. The Velothians' gaseous forms turned deep purple with shock. The Korthax representatives began speaking in rapid mechanical bursts. Even the Eternal Assembly's delegate, a being of pure crystallized thought, seemed to dim with concern. Sarah watched the chaos unfold, and felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. She had studied the Seraphim ostensibly during her xenobiology training. They were one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations, existing for over 50,000 years as beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form. They were immortal, infinitely wise, and completely peaceful. The idea that they could simply vanish was like suggesting gravity might stop working. "Dr. Mitchell," a melodic voice called from behind her. Sarah turned to see Cathari approaching, her elongated features showing the stress lines that appeared when Centauri pushed their telepathic abilities too hard. "The Assembly has requested your analysis of the disappearances. Your species may have a unique perspective on this situation." Sarah felt Marcus tense beside her. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy was complicated. Most species viewed Earth as a fascinating but dangerous anomaly, a world so hostile that it had produced a species capable of surviving conditions that would kill most galactic citizens within minutes. Humans were often seen as primitive savages who had somehow stumbled into space technology. "What kind of perspective are they looking for?" Sarah asked carefully. Cathari's large eyes reflected the swirling colors of the station's ambient lighting. "The vanished civilizations represent the pinnacle of galactic achievement. The Seraphim, the crystal mines of Altara, the Harmony Collective, these were species that had evolved beyond conflict, beyond want, beyond fear. Their disappearance suggests we are facing something that specifically targets advancement and peace. And you think humans might understand something about that because we come from a death world," Marcus said. It wasn't really a question. He had heard the whispered conversations, seen the way other species looked at humans with a mixture of fascination and revulsion. "Your species survived on a planet that actively tried to kill you for millions of years," Cathari replied. "You evolved in an environment of constant threat, constant adaptation, constant struggle. Perhaps you can understand an enemy that we cannot." Sarah exchanged a look with Marcus. They both knew the statistics that made other species uncomfortable. Earth's gravity was 3 times stronger than the galactic average. Its weather patterns included phenomena that could level cities. Its native predators had evolved specifically to hunt the most dangerous prey available. Other predators, humanity had survived ice ages, volcanic winters, asteroid impacts, and diseases that had driven other species extinct. "I'll need access to all the data," Sarah said finally. "Sensor readings, communication logs, anything that might give us clues about what we're dealing with." The next 6 hours passed in a blur of data analysis and growing horror. Sarah worked with a team of the galaxy's brightest minds, trying to find patterns in the disappearances. The Zenthari contributed their telepathic sensing data. The Korthax provided detailed technical analysis. The Eternals shared theoretical models that stretched the boundaries of known physics. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. "It's not random," Sarah announced to the emergency session of the Assembly. "The attacks follow a specific pattern, but not based on location or resources. It's targeting consciousness itself." The holographic display showed her analysis. Every vanished civilization shared certain characteristics. They had evolved beyond physical conflict. They had achieved harmony between different aspects of their society. They had developed some form of collective consciousness or shared empathic connection. "You're suggesting that advancement makes civilizations vulnerable," said the Korthax representative, its mechanical voice processing the implications. "I'm suggesting that whatever is doing this feeds on something that these civilizations had in abundance: peace, harmony, collective thought. These might not be strengths against this enemy. They might be exactly what it's hunting. The silence that followed was broken by an alarm that had never sounded in Nexus Station's history. The emergency beacon meant only one thing: they were under direct attack. Through the station's massive viewing ports, they could see something approaching that defied description. It wasn't a ship or a creature or a natural phenomenon. It was an absence, a moving void that seemed to eat light itself. Where it passed, space itself seemed to become less real, less substantial. Scanning announced the station's AI in 17 different languages, unable to identify approaching object. Mass readings inconsistent. Energy signatures impossible. Recommend immediate evacuation. But there was nowhere to run. The thing was moving faster than any ship in the galaxy, and it was heading directly for the station. Sarah felt Marcus grab her hand as the station's lights began to flicker. Around them, delegates from dozens of species stood frozen in terror, as they faced something their advanced civilizations had never prepared them for. The Zen-3's telepathic abilities were screaming warnings that made no sense. The Eternal's crystalline forms were cracking under some invisible pressure. "It's feeding," Cathari whispered, her musical voice breaking with horror. "I can feel it through the telepathic network. It's feeding on our fear, our despair, our sense of helplessness." That's when Sarah understood. The enemy wasn't just targeting advanced civilizations randomly. It was specifically hunting species that had evolved beyond survival instincts, beyond the ability to fight back against the impossible. It fed on the very qualities that made civilizations great: their peace, their unity, their faith in rational solutions. But humans had never lost their survival instincts. Earth had never let them evolve beyond the need to fight for their lives. While other species had transcended violence, humans had refined it. While others had grown beyond fear, humans had learned to use it as a weapon. As the void approached and the station's systems began failing, Sarah realized something that would change the course of galactic history. The galaxy's greatest civilizations were helpless against this enemy, not because they weren't advanced enough, but because they were too advanced. They had evolved beyond the very qualities needed to fight something that existed only to consume and destroy. "Marcus," she said quietly as darkness began to creep through the station's corridors, "I think we're going to need to call home." The captain understood immediately. While the galaxy's most advanced species stood paralyzed by an enemy they couldn't comprehend. Somewhere in a small solar system on the outer rim, a species of evolved predators was about to receive a very interesting phone call. The void reached Nexus Station and began to feed. But for the first time in its existence across countless galaxies, it encountered something unexpected. As it consumed the fear and despair of advanced civilizations, it also tasted something new in the human sections of the station. Anger, not the helpless rage of the doomed, but the cold, calculating fury of predators who had just identified their prey when death meets death. The emergency transmission from Nexus Station reached Earth 37 hours after the attack began. Admiral Rebecca Stone stood in the command center of Lunar Base, staring at a holographic message that should have been impossible. The transmission was fragmented, parts of it corrupted by something that seemed to eat data itself. But the core message was clear. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations were being systematically destroyed by an enemy they couldn't fight. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Commander James Wright from the communications station. "We're receiving secondary transmissions from human outposts throughout the galaxy. The pattern is confirmed. Advanced civilizations are vanishing, but the attacks seem to avoid systems with significant human populations. Admiral Stone had spent her entire career preparing for conflicts that military strategists said would never come. Humanity had joined the galactic community as junior partners, contributing scientific research and cultural exchange, while more advanced species handled the serious business of governance and exploration. The idea that Earth might need to defend the galaxy had been considered absurd by everyone except the humans themselves. "Get me a direct line to Dr. Mitchell if she's still alive," Stone ordered, "and start warming up the home fleet. Something tells me we're about to break our neutrality agreements." The connection took several minutes to establish, fighting through interference that seemed almost alive. When Sarah's face finally appeared on the screen, she looked exhausted but determined. Behind her, the lights of Nexus Station flickered. Erratically, "Admiral, thank God," Sarah said. "We need immediate military assistance. The entity has partially consumed the station, but something is holding it back from completing the process." "What kind of something?" Stone asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Us. The humans on the station." Sarah's voice carried a mixture of wonder and grim satisfaction. "Admiral, this thing feeds on the psychic energy of advanced civilizations. It consumes their peace, their harmony, their collective consciousness. But human minds are different. We're not connected in the same way. Our survival instincts are too strong, our individualism too pronounced. When it tries to feed on us, it gets something it's never encountered before." Through the static-filled connection, Stone could hear the sounds of what might have been combat in the background. "Dr. Mitchell, are you telling me that humans are fighting this entity hand-to-hand?" Captain Chen organized the human crew into hunting parties. Sarah replied with something that might have been pride. "We can't hurt it directly, but we can disrupt its feeding process. Every time it tries to consume a section of the station, with humans in it, we fight back in ways it doesn't understand. We use fear as fuel instead of letting it paralyze us. We get angry instead of despairing. We attack instead of accepting death." Admiral Stone felt a cold smile cross her face. "Doctor, how many other species have asked for human military assistance? None of them want to admit they need help from primitives," Sarah said bitterly. "But Admiral, the Zenthari telepaths are picking up something through their network. This entity isn't alone. There are others, maybe dozens of them, moving through the galaxy. They're systematically eliminating every advanced civilization they encounter." The connection flickered and nearly died before stabilizing again. When the image cleared, Sarah was looking directly into the camera with an expression Stone recognized from a dozen battlefields. "Admiral, we need to do something that's never been done before. We need to teach the galaxy how to be human." 6 hours later, the first ships of the Human Expeditionary Force dropped out of hyperspace around Nexus Station. Admiral Stone commanded. From the flagship U.S. Defiance, a name that had seemed overly dramatic when the ship was commissioned, now it felt prophetic. The entity around Nexus Station was larger than the sensor readings had indicated. It stretched for thousands of kilometers in all directions, a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to exist in more dimensions than space-time should allow. At its center, the station flickered like a dying ember, parts of it consumed while other sections somehow remained intact. Scanning the entity, reported Commander Lisa Park from the science station. "Admiral, our sensors can't get a coherent reading. It's as if the thing exists partially outside our reality." "Then we don't fight it like a normal enemy," Stone replied. "All ships implement Protocol Omega." Protocol Omega was something that existed only in theoretical human military doctrine. It was based on the assumption that humanity might, someday, face an enemy so alien that conventional tactics would be useless. The protocol called for maximum aggression, complete unpredictability, and the deliberate use of what other species considered humanity's greatest weaknesses as weapons. The human fleet scattered in all directions, moving in patterns that violated every principle of space combat doctrine taught in the galaxy. Instead of maintaining formation or establishing secure communication lines, they attacked independently, using random vectors and improvised tactics. The entity's response was immediate and confused. It had consumed civilizations across multiple galaxies, always following the same pattern. Species would detect it, analyze it, attempt to negotiate with it, and finally accept their fate with varying degrees of dignity. The entity would feed on their fear, their despair, their resignation, growing stronger with each civilization it consumed. But humans didn't follow the pattern. Captain Elena Rodriguez commanded the destroyer use Stubborn, and her ship lived up to its name. Instead of trying to analyze the entity or find a diplomatic solution, she ordered a direct attack on its most concentrated mass. All batteries, fire for effect, she ordered. Target anything that looks important. The human weapons were primitive by galactic standards, but they had been designed with one principle in mind: maximum violence in minimum time. Nuclear missiles, kinetic projectiles, and plasma cannons unleashed a barrage that would have crippled any conventional target. The entity absorbed the attack without apparent damage, but something unexpected happened. For the first time in its existence, it felt something that might have been confusion. The human weapons weren't trying to communicate or negotiate. They weren't powered by fear or desperation. They were driven by something the entity had never encountered: calculated aggression from a species that enjoyed fighting. On Nexus Station, the remaining survivors watched in amazement as the entity's consumption process began to slow. Ambassador Cathari pressed her telepathic senses against the phenomenon, trying to understand what was happening. "The humans are broadcasting something," she reported to the mixed group of survivors. "Not through normal communication channels, but through their actions. They're showing the entity that not all species are the same." Captain Chen had organized the human survivors into what he called disruption teams. They moved through the station's corridors, seeking out areas where the entity was actively feeding on trapped aliens and doing something that violated every principle of advanced civilization. They attacked with primitive weapons and raw aggression. "Remember," Chen told his teams, "this thing feeds on helplessness and despair, so we give it the opposite. We show it what happens when you threaten a species that learned to hunt predators." The results were unlike anything in galactic history. Where advanced species had tried to negotiate or analyze the entity, humans simply shot at it. Where others had accepted their fate with dignity, humans screamed defiance and kept fighting until the last possible moment. Where civilized beings had died quietly, humans died loudly and took pieces of their enemy with them. The entity began to withdraw from Nexus Station, not because it was defeated, but because the human sections of the station were giving it something toxic. Instead of the pure fear and despair it craved, it was getting contaminated with anger, defiance, and something else that burned hope. In the space around the station, the human expeditionary force continued its chaotic attack. Ship after ship dove directly at the entity, firing everything they had before pulling away at the last possible moment. Some didn't pull away in time and were consumed, but even in death, Their crews broadcast messages that were picked up by survivors throughout the galaxy. "This is Captain Martinez of the UES Relentless," came one final transmission. "If any aliens are listening, take notes. This is how humans say goodbye." The entity began to move away from Nexus Station, seeking easier prey among the galaxies. Peaceful civilizations. But something had changed. For the first time, it had encountered prey that fought back, not with advanced technology or superior intellect, but with something much more primitive and much more dangerous. The absolute refusal to give up. Admiral Stone watched the entity retreat and opened a general communication channel that broadcast to every inhabited system in the galaxy. "This is Admiral Rebecca Stone of the Human Defense Force," she began. "To all galactic civilizations currently under attack by the entities, humanity offers the following assistance. We will teach you how to be angry. We will show you how to fight creatures that exist only to destroy. We will give you something your advanced civilizations never needed, but now require desperately, the knowledge of how to be primitive, violent, and absolutely unwilling to die quietly." The response was immediate. Species that had never considered humanity worthy of notice suddenly found themselves desperate for lessons in what they had always considered humanity's greatest flaws. The Zenthari wanted to learn how to use fear as a weapon instead of a weakness. The Eternals sought instruction in the art of individual determination over collective consciousness. The Velothians asked for training in what humans called righteous anger, but the most important response came from the entities themselves. As they spread across the galaxy, consuming one peaceful civilization after another, they began to encounter something they had never faced before: advanced species that had learned to fight like humans. The war for the galaxy had begun, and for the first time in cosmic history, the most primitive species in known space found themselves teaching survival to civilizations millions of years older than their own Dr. Sarah. Mitchell stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Nexus Station, watching human instructors work. With delegates from across the galaxy, a Zenthari diplomat was learning to channel telepathic energy into what humans called battle rage. An Eternal was practicing the art of individual decision-making under pressure. A Velothian was discovering how to use atmospheric manipulation as a weapon instead of a tool. "It's working," Captain Chen said, joining her at the observation window. "The entities are still out there, but they're not having the easy time they expected. Species that should have been consumed weeks ago are still fighting." Sarah nodded, watching a human sergeant teach a group of crystal-based life forms how to weaponize their natural abilities. "We didn't save the galaxy by being more advanced," she said quietly. "We saved it by being less civilized." Outside the station, ships from dozens of species practiced human combat maneuvers. They were learning to be unpredictable, aggressive, and willing to take casualties for strategic advantage. They were discovering that sometimes the best solution to an impossible problem was to punch it in the face and see what happened. The entities still controlled vast sections of the galaxy, and the war was far from over. But for the first time since the attacks began, the galaxy's civilizations had something they had lost long ago: the knowledge that some fights were worth having. Some enemies deserved destruction, and sometimes the most advanced thing you could do was remember how to be primitive. Humanity had found its place in the galactic community not as junior partners or primitive curiosities, but as the species that remembered what others had forgotten. That survival sometimes required embracing the very qualities that civilization was supposed to transcend. The Deathworlders had answered the galaxy's call for help, and they had brought the one thing that advanced civilizations couldn't provide for themselves: the willingness to be absolutely, primitively, magnificently human.